We will finish some slides of this one. That is, I tempted to study few slides of this line. That is comparative literature, culture and nationalism. We have talked many things about this culture and nationalism. Actually, after the independence, nationalism grew among the European countries. That was very common. So today we will be discussing the scenario of Italy. That is actually in 1835, French critic Literature-C7 idealistic picture of international cooperation. Cooperative literature, means of literary influence, is only the one side of the coin. So in previous class we have got the influence, classes on influence. That is, southern part of France was many times isolated, but next time influenced the northern part of France. Okay, so that was the influence of literature, one literature to the other. So Charles said that is the one side of comparative literature, and the other side we find completely different phenomena of cultural exchange on the other side of the coin. What is that coin? That is other side of the coin. Regarding the alternative perspectives of cultural exchange in the 1919, Lord Byron, in his preface to Prophecy of Dante, commented that the Italian with pardonable nationality are particularly zealous of all that has left them as a nation of their literature, and in the present bitterness of the classic romantic where are built ill disposed of a permit of foreigner even to approve or imitate them. So in Prophecy of Dante, Byron said that actually Italian, they love their literature and culture very well, and even they do not approve other literature with their culture. Who commented that? Lord Byron in his Prophecy of Dante. Byron observed the close relationship between national identity and cultural inheritance. So again and again we have talked it several times. He also recognized that a nation or a series of small states, as Italy at the time, was struggling for independence and jealously guarded its literary heritage against all comers. So actually Italy was trying to identify their own cultural heritage from all comers. All comers, Italy is a European country, and the European country, Italy tried to exhibit their own cultural identity and heritage. Byron identified two kinds of influence. That is, influence of what? Actually, in Italy at that time was like that. So many states are there, so many parts are there. Okay, and in 19th century there was a unification of Italy. Italy at that time there was a collection of several states. Okay, and through 1820 to 1871, the Italy became like this. The previous map of Italy was, that is the combination of several states, but they are separated. But through the struggle in 1871, the unification of Italy was done, and Italy becomes like this. That is, all states came together. So this Italy, they tried to unite. Italy tried to understand what is their culture. So many newcomers are there in Italy because many parts of these states are there. Kingdom of Italy, inspired by the revolution and Congress of Vienna, and also the revolution in 1848, the capture of Rome and its designation as the capital of Kingdom of Italy. So in 1848, Rome became the capital of Italy. So they also thought that what is their culture, because Italy has a very troublesome history. What is their culture? They said that many newcomers were there. So here Byron identified that there are two kinds of influence. As we have said in previous class, that there would be cultural imperialism. One person or one country or one civilization will try to impose their culture to others. বলতে চাই যে আমাদের কালচারটা ভালো, আমাদের ন্যাশনালিজমটা ভালো। সো ইটালি অ্যাট দ্যাট টাইম অনেকগুলো ছোট ছোট রাষ্ট্রের সমন্বয় ছিল। তাহলে ইটালির স্পেসিফিক কালচারাল হেরিটেজ কোনটা? বাইরন বলছে দেয়ার আর সাম ইনফ্লুয়েন্স অফ হোয়াট টাইপ? দ্যাট ইজ borrowed influences and stolen influences. Borrowed influences in which sense? That is borrowed influence, that means if a country is influenced by some other country, said that this is their culture, that we have understood, that we are using the dress that can be European dress, okay, but that is, we admit that it is European culture, that is borrowed influence. But stolen influences try to exhibit a culture, and that culture is taken from other parts of this world, but there is no footnotes, or there is no reference that is their culture. That is called stolen culture. So you are maintaining a culture and you said that it is your culture. Actually that is not your culture. You have stolen your culture from the other parts of this world. That is the stolen influences. Both work for a matter of perspectives in comparative literature. So the borrowed influences and the stolen influences both will be the part of comparative literature. So regarding the influence of other literature, so what we had been discussing that Italy in the first half of 19th century, Italy was not a united country that was separated in several parts, but even they were influenced and they tried to unify the Italian culture and identity. And for this reason they said that two kinds of influences, that is borrowed influences and stolen influences. Some kind of influences we will see that the other part of this Europe country, that is regarding the influence of other literature. Translation literature played a vital role in Czech literary revival in the first half of 19th century. So we have said the influence in case of Italian culture, that was one kind of influence. In case of Czech, another European country, influence was there. What type of influence? Borrowed influence or stolen influence, we have said. And Italy, Byron said that Italy got their cultural heritage or cultural identity from one of such kind of influences. It may be borrowed influences or it may be stolen influences. But what happened to Czech? They have a great writer, that is Vladimir Makura, okay. And Czechian writer Vladimir Makura calls that politics of translation. That is the politics of translation. As translation has played the key role in the pattern of influence in comparative literature. Previously we have discussed that translation played a vital role in comparative literature. Vladimir mentions revolutionary scholar and patriot Joseph Jungmann, who claimed that in the language is our identity. That means language is our identity. So when some other literature will be translated in Bangla, then that would be part of Bangla literature. But it is said that language is our identity. That means if any writing is translated in Bangla, কোনো একটা সাহিত্য যখন বাংলা ভাষায় ট্রান্সলেশন করা হবে, সেটা আমাদের বাংলা সাহিত্যের অংশ হয়ে যাবে, ওকে। কিন্তু এটা তো আসলে আমরা ট্রান্সলেশন করে নিয়ে এসেছি। Such kind of situation happened in Czech. What happened there? Jungmann found translation as a significant part of developing new Czech literature. Why? He argued that the origin of a text is less important than what happened to the text in the process of translation. So Jungmann argued that what is the actual text, it doesn't matter. The matter is important that after the translation what would be happening for the literature, what would be happening for the text. একটা সাহিত্যকে ট্রান্সলেশন করার পরে সেটা কোন দেশের সাহিত্য বা কোন সংস্কৃতির সাহিত্য না, ট্রান্সলেশন করার পরে তার ইভ্যালুয়েশন কীরকম হবে সেটাই গুরুত্বপূর্ণ। Who said? Jungmann said. And to Jungmann, translation to Czech was a process of enhancement, a means of extending the range of language and the emergent literature. In the late 18th and the early 19th century, we find a time of immense literary turmoil throughout the Europe. Okay, we have seen nation engaged in a struggle for independence and in the process of getting their cultural roots. Every European country. The most extraordinary example of some root is the first medieval manuscript discovered by Václav Hanka. So when the European countries were trying or struggling to have their cultural roots, তাদের কালচারের তারা কোন সংস্কৃতি, তাদের লিটারেচারি বেসিস কি, তাদের কালচারাল বেসিস কি, তখন একজন এই চেক রাইটার, তার নাম হলো ভালক্লাভ হাঙ্কা, he said that Hanka and his colleague declared that they have discovered unique manuscript of old Czech of 9th, 10th and 13th century. Hanka declared that actually our Czech literature has a very great past. What is the great past? That he said that in 9th, 10th and 13th century we have a great literature. Who said? Czech Republic. That was a country in the center of Europe, and that means Germany, Poland, Slovakia, Lithuania, Austria. So many countries are there. But within that country, the Hanka, he said that Czech, they had a very great past. What is the great past? They said that we have a great literary past in 9th, 10th and 13th century. And they announced that there had been a golden age of Czech poetry and time, which of the rest of the Europe are struggling for decaying epic form. So in Europe, not only all the country of Europe, we have got the map over here, that is Germany, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, Slovakia, Italy, all had been struggling to have their cultural roots. They had been founding, they were in the discussion that আসলে epic form তাদের কালচার কিনা, এবং সেটা এপিক হলে ওরাল এপিক তাদের কালচারের অংশ হবে কিনা। সেই সময় চেক বলল যে ইয়েস, উই হ্যাভ আ কালচারাল হেরিটেজ, অ্যান্ড অ্যাকচুয়ালি ইন দ্য 9th, 10th and 13th century we have a great poetry. Interestingly enough, that later the manuscript was proved fraudulent. So Hanka, what he said, actually the thing they were inspired, and actually this is not actually the literature of Czech. But by then it gave powerful impulse to Czech literature. We have said two kinds of influence. Italy was trying to have influence, and they established their national cultural identity. In the same way, Czech was inspired by their past literary tradition of 9th, 10th and 13th century. But next time it was proved that it is fraudulent. So two kinds of influence, borrowed influence and stolen influence. So here, from the fraudulent influence, Czech literature was flourished a lot. What happened? As a result, within a century, Czech had been seen as a major European language. Okay, যদি এই মিথ্যা কথাটা হাঙ্কা না বলতো, তখন তারা যারা বলছে তখন তারা সত্য ভেবেই বলেছে, পরে এটা প্রমাণিত হয়েছে মিথ্যা। কিন্তু এই মিথ্যার উপরে ভিত্তি করে চেক লিটারেচার, চেক ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ, চেকিফিয়ান ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ became one of the dominant language in Europe. If they were not influenced by such kind of fraudulent or false literary tradition, then the Czech language will not be established and Czech literature will not be established, because Jagannath said, that is, language is our identity, language is our identity, language is our cultural heritage. So inspired with that fraudulent manuscript, এই যে চেকের মধ্যে সে একটা মিথ্যা লিটারেচার দ্বারা ইন্সপায়ার্ড হয়ে glorious past, 3 volumes of Slovakian national songs were published in 1822, and 5 volumes of history of Bohemia, all written in Czech language. And in the same year, the greatest poet of Czech romantic revival, Karel Macha, published his major poem May. So all were inspired for what? For identifying or for getting their cultural identity. And after that, Czech, that country was influenced by some fraudulent or false literary tradition. With that fault and stolen influences, Czech language became one of the important languages in Europe. And not only that, their literature got so many volumes. What are the volumes? That is song, collection of songs, 5 volumes of history of Bohemia, and also the Czech romantic poet Karel Macha published his poem May. So we are discussing about cultural and national identity. So in such a way, Europe, and especially in Italy and Czech, Italy was inspired by the past, and in the same way Czech was influenced by the false literary tradition, and their language, that is Czech language, and their literature established in Europe. So national identity and the language identity and the influence are the part of comparative literature. Okay, so assisted by the fourth literary tradition, Czech was desperately trying to establish a cultural root as a desire to nationalism and the time of ongoing cultural and the political struggle in Europe. Okay, so same tendency was looking back to the glorious hidden past was shared by several nations throughout Europe. Mid 18th century onwards saw immense interest for publishing folk song, poetry and folk tales related to the national roots. Actually watching চেকের ঘটনা দেখে পুরো ইউরোপের সমস্ত দেশ খুবই উজ্জীবিত হয়ে গেল। তারা তখন কি করা শুরু করলো, তাদের দেশের যে ফোক, তাদের যে লোকগাথা, তাদের যে ওরাল যে কালচারগুলো, ট্রেডিশনগুলো, সেগুলো তারা কি করতে শুরু করলো, দে স্টার্টেড পাবলিশিং সাচ কাইন্ড অফ ফোক and oral tradition all parts of the Europe. For example, Parsi relics, the ancient English poetry appeared in 1765. What is the tradition? Italy got their national and cultural identity. Next time Czech got their national identity and cultural identity. And with that we have seen that Parsi also published a collection of their folk song and oral song, and that was also a collection. And the great Danish poet Johannes Ewart published significant collection of ancient saga. Saga means story, and the medieval ballads in 1771. So next time we have seen in the Danish tradition of cultural and literary roots. Heider Steamer de Volker in Leder published in 1778. Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm fairy tales. So these fairy tales, the Volker, all were initiated from the folk song. Folk song means that are the oral tradition of a country's culture. যেই কথা, গান, ছড়াগুলো মানুষের মুখে মুখে পরিচিত হতে থাকে, এই ছড়া, কথা, গানগুলো মানুষের মুখ থেকে নিয়ে অনেক কবিতা এগুলো কি কালেকশন প্রকাশ করতে শুরু করলো। In which process? In the process of getting their cultural identity and literary identity. And Ellis Lönnrot's version of the Finnish national epic, and Kalevala in 1849. So these were the tradition. The fascination with the past as well as the development of the literary history, philosophy, archaeology and the political history was directly linked to the general European questions of the definition of nationhood. So the nationhood, after getting such kind of folk song, after getting such kind of oral tradition, after getting of such kind of collection of sagas, actually they tried to give definition of their nationhood. As we have observed that language is their cultural identity, and next time with the language and the folk song and the other literature collection of poems that is written in their own language, that became the identity of their nationhood. So language and literature became the integral part of a nation or a culture. And for this reason Rousseau talked about the collective personality of the people. Collective personality, that means nationhood. He regarded this, that Timothy Benin pointed out that German and the Heider transformed Rousseau's people. Actually Rousseau said people, and Germany Heider transformed the Rousseau's form people as Volk. Folklore. Folk means common people. Folklore, common people's narrative will be the folklore. Okay, in the same way people's narrative, people will be similar to folk and also the folklore. Okay, so Rousseau said the common people identity as the people, and next time Heider in Germany he said that is the folk. So again that is in the initiation of the cultural identity. So the significance of this later concept as it shift from the Rousseau's Enlightenment emphasis on the civic virtue of romantic insistence of the primordial and the ineluctable roots of the nationhood, a distinguished feature of the all communities. So each people now set up to the natural characteristics of language and the intelligible quality of specific folk gist. So Rousseau said people, and from the people's oral song they initiated folk culture and folk poem, and that became the identity of a nation. So we had been discussing in which part, that is the culture and identity in comparative literature, culture and nationhood. So Italy tried to exhibit their nationhood. In the same way, Czech also was influenced by some false writing, but they established their nationhood, and that was also supported in other parts or in other countries in Europe. Thank you.